Channel. This is going to be part 3 of our Bible stories. Okay? Picking up where we left off, Genesis 16 through 18. Abram, Sarai, and Hagar. Sarai was growing old, and still she had no children. She went to her husband, Abram, and told him that he should have a child by Hagar, her servant. "Look on Hagar," she said, "as though she were your wife." This Abram did, but once Hagar realized she was going to have a baby, she began to be conceited and act rudely towards Sarai. "Hagar now looks down on me and insults me." "You must deal with her as you think right," Abram replied. Upon this, Sarai began to treat her servant so harshly that Hagar ran away into the desert. An angel found Hagar beside a spring in the wilderness where she was weeping. "What are you doing here?" he asked her. "I am running away from my cruel mistress." "You must return and behave well toward her. You are soon to give birth to a son whose name shall be Ishmael, and his descendants will be numbered in millions." So Hagar returned and shortly afterward gave birth to a boy. Abram was then 86 years old. I think she needs a nap. I can't even make a joke that I was going to make because it's women out here really murdering their children saying God and Jesus told them to do it. So I'm going to keep that joke to myself. At anywho, you guys, so Hagar returned to Sarai and Abram's crib and shortly afterward gave birth to a boy. Abram was then 86 years old. He looked at his son and gave him the name Ishmael, which means God hears. When Abram was 99, God appeared to him and said, "You shall be the father of many nations, and to mark this, you must change your name to Abraham. I will keep my promise to you, and Canaan shall belong to you and your descendants forever, and I will be their God. Among your people, every male must be circumcised now, and every male child of future generations. This will be a sign that you will keep your promise to me. From now on, your wife must be called Sarah, and she will be the mother of your son." Abraham laughed to himself at the idea that a man of 100 and a woman of 90 should have a child. But God said, "Sarah will indeed have a son, and you shall call him Isaac, and he will be the father of princes. It will be with Isaac that my promise shall be continued, a covenant to be kept with all his descendants throughout their generations. As for Ishmael, I will bless him and always look after him. He will lead a long and prosperous life and will have many children. He will be a great power in the land, even though it is his brother Isaac, whom I have chosen as the father of my people." The Israelites considered children to be a gift from God. To be born barren and unable to have a child, as Sarai was for many years, caused much heartache. Time passed, and God appeared to Abraham near the trees of Mamre in the heat of the day. Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent when he looked up and saw 3 strangers standing before him. At once he came out to greet them. "My lords," Abraham said, bowing low, "if I have found favor with you, do not pass me by. Come, sit under this tree so that you may wash your feet and rest, and we will bring you food, for we are your servants." Abraham then hurried back into the tent, giving orders to Sarah to bake bread and for a tender young calf to be roasted. He stood by them under the tree while they ate. "Where is your wife?" they asked. "She is in the tent. Soon she will bear you a son." Now Sarah was listening to this and she laughed at the idea that such an old woman should bear a child. But God heard her and rebuked her. Do you think there is anything too difficult for God to do? He asked her. Genesis 18 through 19, Sodom and Gomorrah. God told Abraham that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah would be destroyed because their inhabitants were guilty of terrible crimes. If you find even 10 righteous people, Abraham implored God, will you have mercy and save these cities from destruction? If I find 10 good people, said the Lord, I will not destroy them. 2 angels left for Sodom. They arrived there in the evening, where they met at the city gates by Abraham's nephew, Lot. He welcomed them to his house and spread before them a feast that he had prepared with his own hands. No sooner had they finished eating when they heard the noise of a large crowd gathering. It was the men of Sodom. L.M.B.Y had been in here doing absolutely nothing. So, anywho, let me get back to these stories because some people don't have access to read a Bible. And again, the Bible is pretty thick. This is synopsis of the stories, okay? So, 2 angels left for Sodom. They arrived there in the evening, where they met at the city gates by Abraham's nephew, Lot. He welcomed them to the house, spread before them a feast that he had prepared with his own hands. No sooner had they finished eating than they heard the noise of a large crowd gathering. It was the men of Sodom. They were demanding that Lot hand over to them his 2 guests for their own pleasure. Lot was full of anger and went out to speak to the crowd. I would rather give you my daughters to do as you please, he said. Oh, no. But these men you must not harm, for they are guests under my roof. The crowd was in a frenzy and took no notice. The men only shouted louder and tried to force their way in. Suddenly, Lot felt the angel's hands on his shoulders. They pulled him inside and shut the door. Then they struck the crowd with blindness so that the men could no longer see where they were. The 2 angels said to Lot, are there any other members of your family here? You must go to them and tell them to leave at once, or they will die when the city is destroyed. Lot hurried to his daughter's husbands and warned them of what was about to happen, but they would not listen and refused to move. Then the angels told Lot that he himself must leave. Take your wife and both your daughters and go quickly, for we must destroy this place and all its wickedness. By now, dawn was breaking, and the angels urged Lot to be gone. When they saw him hesitate, they took him by the hand and led him through the deserted streets and out beyond the city walls. Run as fast as you can and make straight for the mountains. Do not look behind you, no matter what. I cannot go far, said Lot. The mountains are too distant. Let me stay instead in the city of Zor. Let me live there and let it not be destroyed. And to this the angels agreed. By the time the sun had risen, Lot had reached Zor. Then the Lord God rained down fire and burning stone on Sodom and Gomorrah, so that they and their people in the surrounding plain and everything that grew and moved upon it were utterly destroyed. Feeling the heat and hearing the noise, Lot's wife turned to look behind her, and instantly she was transformed into a pillar of salt. The next morning, Abraham rose early, and going to the place where he had talked with the Lord, he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah. Instead of those 2 great cities of the plain, he saw nothing but thick black smoke, like the smoke from a giant furnace. Genesis 21, Abraham's 2 sons. It happened just as the Lord had said. When Abraham was 100 years old, Sarah gave birth to a son whom they named Isaac from the word laugh. And when the baby was 8 days old, he was circumcised. Both parents were overjoyed that at last they had a child, and Abraham gave a magnificent feast and celebration. Who would have thought that I, at my age, would have given birth? Sarah exclaimed. God made me laugh with happiness so that all who heard should rejoice with me. Soon, however, Sarah noticed that Hagar's son Ishmael was making fun of Isaac. Ishmael must go, she insisted. You must turn him out and his mother with him. Abraham was saddened, for he loved both his sons, but God reassured him. Do as Sarah asks, for I will look after both Ishmael and Isaac. They will both live to be the founders of great nations. Early the next morning, Abraham gave Hagar some bread and a leather skin filled with water and sent her into the desert of Beersheba with Ishmael. The Arab people are traditionally believed to be the descendants of Ishmael. The two of them wandered many miles through the hot, stony wilderness. Soon the bread was eaten, the skin dry, and there was no water to be found anywhere. Believing that death was near, Hagar laid her child under a bush and then, weeping, went to sit by herself some way off so that she would not see him die. Suddenly she heard the voice of an angel. Do not be afraid, said the voice. God will not let Ishmael die, for he has a glorious future before him. Go to him now and take him by the hand. As Hagar dried her eyes, she saw in front of her a spring. Eagerly, she filled her skin, then went to Ishmael and gave him the water to drink. For some years, Hagar and Ishmael made their home in the desert, where Ishmael grew up strong and brave, skillful with bow and arrow. In due course, he married a young woman who came from the land of Egypt. Genesis 22, the sacrifice of Isaac. God spoke to Abraham in order to test his faith. With your beloved son Isaac, you must go to the land of Moriah, to a certain mountain which I will show you. There, instead of a goat or lamb, you must sacrifice your son on the fire. The next morning, obedient to God's will, Abraham saddled a donkey and set off for Moriah, taking Isaac and two servants with him. When they got to the mountains, Abraham stopped to cut some wood, giving it to his son to carry. He himself took a sharp knife and a flaming torch with which to light the fire. You stay here with the donkey, he told the two men. We are going up the mountain to pray and make an offering to God. Father, said Isaac as they started on their way, we have the wood for a fire, but where is the lamb to be sacrificed? God will provide, answered Abraham. When they reached the place chosen by God, Abraham built an altar on which he piled the wood. Then, tying Isaac's arms tightly to his sides, he placed the boy on top of the pile. Abraham lifted the knife high above his head, preparing to plunge it into Isaac's breast. But at that moment, he heard the voice of the angel of the Lord. Abraham, Abraham, do not hurt your son. You have proved your perfect love of God by your willingness to sacrifice even your child. Looking around, Abraham saw a ram caught by the horns in the tangled branches of a bush. He untied Isaac and, seizing hold of the ram, put the animal on the altar in place of his son. The angel spoke again. Because you've done this for the love of God, you will be blessed, and your son and your son's sons will be blessed, and they shall be as many in number as the stars in the sky. Then Abraham and Isaac together came down from the mountain, and with the two servants returned to Beersheba. If you haven't checked out my shorts, look at my shorts. A comedian made a funny video about that story that I shared yesterday. Genesis 24, Isaac and Rebekah. Sarah was dead, and Abraham knew he himself had not long to live. He sent for his most trusted servant. My people are settled in Canaan, but I do not want my son to marry a Canaanite. You must go to the land of my birth, and from there bring back a wife for Isaac." And so the servant set off for the city of Nahor in Mesopotamia, taking with him a train of 10 camels laden with rich gifts. He arrived outside the city walls in the evening when the women were gathering to draw water at the well. As he watched them, he prayed to God for a sign. "Let her whom I asked for water be the wife for Isaac." Almost before he had finished his prayer, a young girl carrying a water jar came to take her turn at the well. Her name was Rebecca, and she was very beautiful. The servant went up to her. "Will you let me drink from your jar?" he asked. "Drink," she said, holding the jar out to him. "And now I will fetch water for your camels as well." The servant was overjoyed at her kindness. From a saddlebag, he took a heavy gold nose ring and 2 bracelets of solid gold and gave them to her. "Where do you live?" he asked. "May I stay at your father's house?" "You are welcome," replied Rebecca. There she hurried home to tell her family. Her brother Laban welcomed the stranger, soon recognizing that it was God's will that Rebecca should return with him to Canaan. Abraham's servant, having sent a prayer of thanks to God, made gifts to Rebekah of gold and silver jewelry and beautiful embroidered cloth. The next morning, Rebekah said goodbye to her family, then set off with her nurse and servants for her new home. Isaac was praying in the fields at twilight when he saw the camel caravan approaching through the dusk. Covering her face with a veil, Rebekah dismounted. The servant described everything that had happened, and Isaac took Rebekah by the hand and led her to his tent. Soon afterward, they were married, and Isaac loved his wife and was comforted by her for the death of his mother, Sarah. Genesis 25-27, Esau and Jacob. After many years of childlessness, Rebekah gave birth to twin boys. The elder, who was covered from head to toe with thick red hair, they named Esau. The younger, born holding his twin's heel, they called Jacob. Esau, whom Isaac loved best, grew up a strong and adventurous hunter, while Jacob, his mother's favorite, preferred staying at home. I was looking at some pictures. One day, Jacob was cooking some lentil stew when his brother came in faint with hunger. "Quick, I'm famished. Give me some of that," Esau demanded. "I will," Jacob replied, "if you give up your rights as firstborn to me." Esau laughed. "What use to me are rights when what I want is a good meal? Then give me your word." And Esau gave his word, and so exchanged his birthright for a plate full of stew and some bread. Isaac, old and blind and near to death, asked Esau to shoot a deer and prepare the dish of venison he so loved. "I want to taste it one last time so that I may bless you before I die," he told them. Rebekah overheard these words and determined that Jacob, not Esau, should receive his father's blessing. "I will cook the dish," she said, "and you must take it to your father in Esau's place. Go now and fetch me 2 young goats." "But he will know I'm not Esau," said Jacob. "Esau is covered in hair, and my skin is smooth. He will know that I'm deceiving him and will put a curse on me. Do as I say, and all will be well." And Rebekah dressed Jacob in his brother's clothes and covered his hands and shoulders with goat skin. She gave him some bread and a bowl of stew made from goat's meat. Then she sent him to his father. "Who are you?" Isaac asked, puzzled. "Come near me so that I may feel you." "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Are you really my eldest son?" "I am," Jacob lied. So Isaac was deceived. Believing that it was Esau who was with him, he ate the food that had been brought to him. He blessed Jacob and promised that he should have everything due to the firstborn. May you be happy and prosperous. I said prosperous. May you be happy and prosperous, and may good fortune come to all who wish you well. Scarcely had Jacob left his father's tent than Esau arrived home from the hunt. So basically, Jacob skedaddled before Esau made it back. So expertly, he prepared the dish of venison and took it to Isaac. Here's your favorite dish, father, he said. Who are you? Asked the old man. I am Esau, your eldest son. Then who is it who has just now been with me and to whom I have given my blessing? Isaac asked, his voice trembling. When Esau heard his father's words, he cried out bitterly. He realized the trick that had been played, and he begged his father to bless him and give him his rights. I will bless you, said Isaac, but I cannot give you what I have already promised to your brother. Isaac knew that the blessing was given before God, and it could not be altered. Esau was filled with hatred for Jacob. He knew that Isaac would soon be dead, so he planned to kill Jacob as soon as the period of mourning for his father's death had passed. But Rebekah heard of his plot and was able to warn Jacob. Your brother is planning to kill you, she told him. Go at once to my brother Laban in Haran and stay there until Esau's anger cools. I'll let you know when it's safe to return. So Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. Genesis 28. Jacob's ladder. On his way to stay with Laban, Jacob stopped for the night. He picked up a large smooth stone to use as a pillow and lay down to sleep. He dreamed he saw a stairway reaching up to heaven with angels moving up and down it. At the top of the stairway was God. I am the God of Abraham and of your father Isaac, said the Lord to Jacob, and I will give the land on which you lie to you and your descendants. When Jacob awoke early the next morning, he was struck with wonder. This is a holy place, for God was here and I did not know it. He took the stone which he had used as a pillow, and having stood it upright, poured oil over it. Then he named the place Bethel, meaning the house of God. Genesis 29 through 30, Jacob and Rachel. Jacob continued on his journey from Bethel. Eventually, he came near Haran in northern Mesopotamia. He saw a field in the middle of which was a well covered by a heavy stone. Around the well lay several flocks of sheep being tended by shepherds. Every day when it was time for the sheep to drink, the shepherds would lift off the stone and draw water for the sheep from the well. They would then replace the stone over the mouth of the well. Jacob greeted the shepherds. Can you tell me the name of this place? He asked. You are in Haran, they told him. Do you know Laban? We know him well, they replied. His daughter Rachel will be coming soon to draw water for their sheep. Jacob sat down and waited, and then he saw Rachel approaching, driving before her a flock of sheep. Jacob thought she was very beautiful. As she drew near, Jacob lifted the stone from the top of the well and helped her water her father's sheep. I am Jacob, the son of Isaac. My mother is Rebekah, your father's sister, he told Rachel. Then he embraced and kissed her. Rachel was delighted to see her cousin. She ran at once to tell her father the news. Laban too was filled with joy and hurried to meet his nephew. Throwing his arms around Jacob, he told him how glad he was that he had come. You are welcome in my house, he said. You are my sister's son. Must come and stay with me. They went back to his home where both Rachel and her elder sister Leah were waiting to welcome Jacob to their father's house. So Jacob, having told his uncle all that had happened between himself and Esau, stayed with Laban for a month. During that time, he worked hard, doing willingly whatever Laban asked him. Genesis 29 through 30, Jacob's wedding. When Jacob had been working for his uncle for a month, Laban said to him, It is not right that you should work for nothing. Tell me what I should give you in payment. Now Jacob looked at Laban's two daughters, Rachel and Leah. Leah was plain, but Rachel was slender and beautiful, and it was she whom Jacob loved. I will work for nothing, he said to Laban, if at the end of 7 years you will give me Rachel as my wife. I would rather she marry you than anyone, said Laban. At the end of that time, she shall be yours. So you mean to tell me so for 7 years, Jacob worked as hard as he knew how. He loved Rachel so much and was so happy in her presence that the time passed quickly, each year seeming no more than a week in length. During my time as a Sunday school teacher for almost 2 years straight, I just focused on it was the New Testament in Jesus's life. Not this. I'm glad that I didn't. At any rate, at the end of 7 years, Jacob went to Laban to claim his reward. Now let me marry Rachel as you promised. Laban called together all his friends and family and gave a great feast to celebrate the marriage of his daughter. But that night, when it was dark, he sent Leah to Jacob in Rachel's place. In the morning, when Jacob saw the older, not the younger sister lying by his side, he realized he had been tricked. How could you do this? He asked Laban. He asked Laban angrily. Did we not make a bargain? Have I not worked for you for 7 years so that I might have Rachel as my wife? This book say Laban shrugged. In this country, it is the custom for the elder daughter to marry first. Leah is the elder, so it is right that you should take her for your wife. He laid a hand soothingly on Jacob's arm. However, he continued, finish the wedding week's festivities, then you may marry Rachel as well if you will work for me another 7 years. To this, Jacob agreed. A week later, Rachel became his wife, and for 7 more years, Jacob worked for Laban. There you go, right there. There's the term sister wives. It came from the Bible. No wonder African American Christian women out here so messy like that. It's making sense now. Now, mind you, this is happening over in the Middle East, what some consider to be, you know what, let me just stop. I ain't even gonna say nothing else. I'm gonna just keep reading this book. So of his 2 wives, Jacob loved Rachel best, the younger one. But while Rachel remained childless, Leah bore her husband 6 sons and a daughter. Rachel grew envious of her sister and in her unhappiness turned against Jacob. Why do you not give me children? She demanded. I am not God, Jacob coldly answered her. But in time, Rachel too conceived, giving birth to a boy called Joseph. Once she had her baby, Rachel's sadness disappeared. Genesis 32 through 33, Jacob's return. After the birth of Joseph, Jacob decided it was time to leave Laban, who was becoming jealous of his skills as a shepherd and his growing wealth. He sent the message to Esau to say he was on his way home and that he had hoped Esau would look favorably on him, and then taking with him his wives and children, all his servants, his herds and flocks, he started out for Canaan. Almost at once, word came that Esau was coming to meet him with a force of 400 men. I fear from this that he means to attack, said Jacob, and prayed to God to save him. He divided his own company into 2 parts so that if Esau did attack, at least half would escape. Then he chose a large number of cattle, camels, and donkeys to give his brother. That evening, Jacob sent all the men, women, and children together with his possessions across the Jabbok River so that he might have some time alone. Suddenly and from nowhere, a stranger appeared and began to wrestle with him. All night they fought in silence. At dawn, the stranger said, "It is now morning and I must leave. Tell me, what is your name?" "My name is Jacob." "You shall not be called Jacob any longer, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and you have prevailed." And with that, the stranger was gone. As the sun rose and light returned to the fields, Jacob realized that he had come face to face with God. He had hardly caught up with his people when they saw a cloud of dust on the road, signaling the approach of Esau and his 400 men. Jacob hurried forward, then bowed down before his brother. Esau threw his arms around him and kissed him, and they both wept. "Welcome, brother," Esau said. "You and yours are welcome home." So it wasn't for war after all. He was actually welcoming his brother home. Genesis 37, Joseph's dreams. Jacob lived in Canaan with his 12 sons. Of all his sons, he loved Joseph the most, as his mother was his beloved wife Rachel. He made Joseph a beautiful coat woven in all the brilliant colors of the rainbow. Jacob's other sons were jealous of Joseph because he was so favored, and when they saw him in his coat of many colors, they hated him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he had told his brothers his dreams, they hated him even more. "I dreamed," he said, "that we were in the fields at harvest, tying up sheaves of wheat. My sheaf of wheat stood upright, while your sheaves bowed down to it." Soon afterward, Joseph had another dream. "I dreamed," he said, "that the sun and moon in the sky and 11 stars were all bowing down to me." When the brothers heard his words, they were furious. A few days later, they took their flocks to graze in fields some distance away. Jacob sent Joseph to see that all was well. The brothers had a clear view of the road and saw Joseph approaching in his multicolored coat. "Now is our chance. We could kill him and throw him into this pit. We could say that a wild animal attacked him." But Reuben, who had a kind heart, spoke out. "Don't let us kill him. We don't want his blood on our hands. Much better just to throw him into the pit and leave him to his fate." And to this the brothers agreed, not knowing that secretly Reuben was planning to return later, rescue Joseph, and take him home. When Joseph reached them, his brothers attacked him at once, ripping off his coat and throwing him into the pit. They left him there without food or water. Then they sat down to eat. At twilight, a group of Ishmaelites came by. They were on their way to Egypt with camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. Judas suggested that they sell Joseph as a slave to the travelers. Then they would be rid of the brother they hated without having to kill him. So Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver, and the Ishmaelites took him with them into Egypt. Meanwhile, the brothers killed a young kid and dipped Joseph's coat in its blood. Their father was filled with horror when they showed it to him. "This is Joseph's coat. My beloved son must have been killed by some wild beast." Jacob tore his clothes in grief and wept, and no one was able to comfort him. Back in those days, and moving forward too, the Ishmaelite traders carried goods such as black peppercorns, myrrh oil, myrrh resin, fennel seeds, balm, and cinnamon. Cinnamon was used as a spice and a perfume. Balm and fennel were used in medicine. Myrrh resin and oil for anointing and embalming bodies. We almost done with Genesis, y'all. Genesis 39:40. Joseph the slave. When the Ishmaelite hold on, I need a bite of my cookie. Oatmeal raisin. And then I had some dragon fruit yogurt with some bananas, granola, strawberries, and blueberries. Joseph the slave. When the Ishmaelites arrived in Egypt, they sold Joseph to one of Pharaoh's officers, Potiphar, captain of the guard. Joseph worked hard for Potiphar, who was so impressed by his skills that he made him head of his household. Now Joseph was a handsome young man, and before long, he caught the eye of Potiphar's wife. She tried very hard to seduce him, but Joseph resisted her. "Your husband trusts me," he said. "You cannot ask me to betray him." Potiphar's wife did not care for her husband or for Joseph's objections. She was light-skinned, by the way. Day after day, she lay in wait, teasing and tempting him, and still he refused her. Then one day in desperation, she cornered Joseph and caught hold of him by the sleeve of his coat. But Joseph was too quick for her, and he made his escape, leaving her with nothing but an empty garment in her hands. Now she was going to take it. Then Potiphar's wife summoned all the servants. "Look what this Hebrew tried to do," she said, holding up Joseph's coat. "He forced his way into my bedroom, and when I cried out, he fled, leaving his coat behind." When her husband came home, he was told the same false story, and Potiphar, enraged, immediately had Joseph thrown into prison. Fortunately, however, the jailer took a liking to the young man and put him in charge of all the other prisoners. It so happened that in the prison with Joseph were Pharaoh's cupbearer and the royal baker. One night, each of them had a dream, which in the morning they asked Joseph to explain. "In my dream," said the cupbearer, "I saw a vine with 3 branches bearing ripe grapes. I squeezed the juice from these grapes into a cup, which I gave Pharaoh to drink." "Your dream," said Joseph, "means that in 3 days, Pharaoh will pardon you." "I," said the baker, "dreamed that I had 3 baskets of bread for Pharaoh stacked on my head, and a flock of birds flew down and ate every crumb." Joseph looked grave. "I am sorry to say that your dreams means that in 3 days, Pharaoh will have you hanged." And it happened just as Joseph said. Within 3 days, the cupbearer was restored to his job, while the baker was hanged. Genesis 41, Pharaoh's dreams. 2 years had passed, and still Joseph was in jail. Then one night, Pharaoh had a strange dream. He was standing by the river Nile, and while he watched, 7 cows, fat and healthy, came out of the water to feed. A while later, 7 thin cows came out of the river, so lean and bony they could barely stand. The thin cows ate up the fat cows. Pharaoh woke with a start. Then he fell asleep and dreamed again. This time he saw 7 ears of wheat growing plump and golden on a single stalk. Then he saw 7 shriveled ears of wheat, which ate up the 7 large ears. In the morning, Pharaoh demanded that someone be found to explain his dreams. All the wise men and magicians were brought before Pharaoh, but no one could tell him the meaning of his dreams. It was then that the cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh how he had correctly interpreted both his and the baker's dreams. Joseph was immediately released from prison and brought before Pharaoh. After thinking for a moment, Joseph said, God has revealed to me what your dreams mean. Egypt is about to enjoy 7 years of great plenty to be followed by 7 years of terrible famine. In the time of plenty, you must save grain from the harvest and store it so that there will be enough to eat during the famine. Pharaoh was so impressed by Joseph that he decided to promote him to the highest office. Pulling the ring from his own finger, he gave it to Joseph. Then he hung a heavy gold chain about his neck and dressed him in fine linen robes. He presented him with a magnificent chariot. You shall be ruler of the whole of Egypt, he declared, second in power only to myself. Under Joseph's supervision, grain was gathered and stored during the 7 years of good harvest. Then, when the lean years arrived, there was more than enough for all. There was so much that people came from distant lands to buy grain, for the famine was everywhere. Genesis 42. Joseph, the governor. The famine had spread to Canaan. Joseph's father Jacob saw that his people were hungry, so he sent 10 of his sons to Egypt to buy wheat. He kept Benjamin, his beloved youngest son, at home with him. The brothers set off on their long journey from Canaan to Egypt. They found their way to the governor, who was their brother Joseph. Once in his presence, they knelt humbly before him, their faces pressed to the ground. Joseph knew at once who they were, but they did not recognize him in his fine clothes. He spoke accusingly, "You are spies, coming here to spy on Egypt." "No," they protested, "we are from Canaan, come here to buy grain. We were 12, but the youngest is at home with our father, and one of us is dead." "Why should I believe you?" Joseph demanded. "You must prove you are not spies. You shall return to Canaan to fetch the youngest. Then I will know if you are telling the truth." But first, Joseph had the brothers thrown into prison for 3 days. On the third day, they were brought again before him. "Take this wheat back to your land," he said, "but bring your youngest brother here, or I shall have you all put to death. And to make sure you obey me, I shall keep one of you here as hostage." The brothers trembled. They felt guilty and believed that this was a punishment for the way they had treated Joseph. As they whispered among themselves, Joseph listened, silently weeping at the sight of their frightened faces. He had spoken through an interpreter and knew they did not realize he could understand everything they said. Suddenly, he gave the order for one of the brothers, Simon, to be bound in front of them and put in jail. Then he had the sacks of the others filled with wheat, and the silver they had brought to pay for it secretly replaced. Lastly, he gave them food before sending them on their way. Overnight on the journey home, one of the brothers opened his sack to get wheat for his donkey and saw the returned silver. "What does this mean?" they asked each other nervously. Once back in Canaan, they told Jacob everything. "My children are being taken away from me. First Joseph, then Simon," said Jacob, "and now you want to take Benjamin. But you shall not take my youngest child from me. If harm came to him, I would go to my grave in sorrow." Genesis 43 through 45. Soon all the grain was gone, and Jacob told his sons that they must go again into Egypt and buy food. "We cannot go without Benjamin," said Judah. Jacob was unhappy, but Judah promised to look after his brother and bring him safely home. "You must take a present for this all-powerful governor," said Jacob. "Take the best our land has to offer: honey, spices, balm, myrrh, and plenty of silver to pay for the wheat." Again, the brothers went to Joseph, who invited them to eat at his house. There they were welcomed by his steward and joyfully reunited with their brother Simon. When Joseph entered, they bowed low and laid their presents before him. At the sight of Benjamin, Joseph was so moved that he left the room and wept. On returning, he offered them the best he had in food and wine, and to Benjamin he gave 5 times more to eat and drink. After dinner, Joseph ordered his men to fill the brothers' sack with grain and to put back the money they had brought with them. In Benjamin's sack, he hid a silver cup of his own. The brothers left as soon as it was light, but they had not gone far when Joseph's steward caught up with them. He searched their sacks in turn. When the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, the steward had them all arrested and taken back to the city. Once more at Joseph's house, the brothers threw themselves on the ground, begging for mercy. "You may all go," said Joseph, "except the man in whose sack the goblet was found. He shall stay and be my servant." "Do not keep Benjamin," Judah implored him. "If he does not return, my father will die of grief, for he loves him dearly, and he has already lost one son. I beg you to keep me instead." Then Joseph felt his heart would break, and he could bear it no longer. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold as a slave. But now I am Pharaoh's chief advisor and governor of all Egypt. You must come and settle here, for there are 5 more years of famine to suffer. Bring all you have, your flocks and your herds, and I will look after you. Tell my father what you have seen." And he threw his arms around Benjamin and wept. And then he kissed all his brothers. The brothers returned to Canaan and told Jacob that Joseph was alive. Jacob was full of joy at the news. He agreed at once to go with them to Egypt, and there they made their home. Quick little synopsis about life in Egypt. They had axes, bows, and played lyres. Women used to be in woolen tunics. They had donkeys, and the men wore kilts. It says when Joseph's family and friends went to live in Egypt to escape from famine in their own country, they were given land in Goshen in the north of the country. This area was part of the Nile Delta, where the river Nile breaks up into many smaller rivers before flowing into the Mediterranean Sea. Because there was plenty of water there, the Israelites were able to grow a great many crops. An Egyptian schoolboy once described in a letter the comfortable way of life. "The countryside provides a wealth of good things. Their pools are full of fish, their lagoons are thick with birds, their meadows are covered with green grass. Their storehouses are full of barley and wheat that tower up to the sky. There are onions and chives to season the food, also pomegranates, apples, olives, and figs from the orchards. People are glad to live there." The rulers of Egypt, the pharaohs, were at the center of Egyptian society. They lived in great luxury and built rich palaces, temples, and tombs. They were buried inside huge stone pyramids with their treasures often made of gold and silver. Many Israelites became wealthy, and some, like Joseph, who had been sold into slavery, rose to have great influence in Egypt. Then, 300 years after Joseph's time, their fortunes changed. In about 1500 BC, the Egyptian rulers turned against people who had come from other countries. This included the Israelites. They became slaves and had to work for others rather than for themselves. Slaves carried out most of the building work, making bricks from a mixture of mud and straw. Royal buildings were usually made of stone. Israelite slaves may have built the cities of Pithom and Ramesses and the great city of Thebes in the south. The impressive buildings at Thebes and in other parts of Egypt show the skill of builders and craftsmen. One of the greatest leaders of the Israelites was Moses, who was found as a baby by the Pharaoh's daughter. He grew up in the grand palaces of the Egyptian court, and as a boy would have learned to read and write in hieroglyphics and take part in popular sports, such as archery and gymnastics. Moses left Egypt after he had killed an Egyptian. He never forgot that he was an Israelite, and he later returned to free his people and lead them out of Egypt at God's command. That was the whole book of Genesis and a synopsis. The next book is Exodus, but we'll go into that another time. I hope you guys enjoyed me reading this to y'all. Bye.